Okay, I think this is a really important video because this very well could save somebody's life. If you ride or you know somebody who does and you think this information might be useful to them, pass it along. So the other morning, I'm on my way up to Nashville to pick up some parts, and I'm on the interstate. Traffic slows down, comes to a stop, and I come across a fatal motorcycle accident. So this is on the interstate, just immediately adjacent to an on-ramp. And this on-ramp is relatively short, and it has a decreasing radius towards the end, just about where you're ready to merge. So when I got there, the accident was recent, so the rider was still where the rider ended up, and the motorcycle was a few hundred feet down the road. And as I looked at what happened, or looked at the scene of the accident, I had an idea, had an intuition on what happened. And then later on, the police report came out and it confirmed my intuition. And then I actually went to the scene just to triple check, just to make sure that I'm not, sharing erroneous information. But what I saw confirmed it all. So this has to do with target fixation. What you see can kill you. So here is the scenario. Like I said, this is an on-ramp. It's a relatively short on-ramp with a decreasing radius towards the end, so that it gets sharper the closer you get to the merge. And apparently what happened was the rider got into this curve a little on the hot side, going a little too fast. It should be noted they were on a sport bike. And I'm not saying anything bad about sport bikes. I rode zillions of sports bikes myself. I'm just giving you the scenario here. So they came into the turn a little bit hot. And what it looks like happened, and I know this because it's happened to me, it's happened to anybody who rides for any amount of time, but in the wrong circumstances, this could be fatal. So what happened was, as they came into the turn and that radius started getting tight on them, they started moving to the outside of the ramp, closest to the interstate. And there's a little grass median, a triangle-shaped median between the ramp and the interstate. As they came into the turn, they realized they were a little too hot, a little far to the outside. And it's apparent to me that they fixated on where the problem was going to lie. So in other words, like you're coming into this turn, you're on the outside of it, you're getting close to the grass, you've got traffic whizzing past you, right, on the road. That's what you want to avoid. But unfortunately, when you see that, when your mind fixates on that point that you're trying to avoid, your body will automatically steer the motorcycle into that direction. See, what a lot of people don't realize about motorcycles is that subconsciously your body is controlling the direction of the motorcycle through these little micro movements. It's a muscle memory that you build up as you ride. And a good example of that is counter steering. If you ride a motorcycle, you automatically counter steer. You may not know what it is, but your body and those little micro movements know that if I want to make a left turn, I turn the handlebars very slightly to the right, and that'll initiate the left turn, right? So people do this instinctively. They counter steer instinctively. Well, target fixation has the same effect. When your eyes are fixated on a point or an object that you're trying to avoid, your muscle memory, only knowing that it has to obey what your eyes see, follows along. Your muscle memory doesn't have a mind of its own. It's reading the landscape through your eyes and then making these decisions. So now you come into this turn hot, you realize you're to the outside, you're looking at what you don't want to do, you're looking at where you don't want to be, and because you're looking where you don't want to be, your body will follow along and steer the motorcycle in that direction. Now, the pavement was a dry, clear day. The pavement is nice, it's good pavement, And if the rider, instead of fixating on where they didn't want to be, had focused on where they wanted to be, they would have leaned the bike and followed that line. But instead, they focused on where they didn't want to be, and it brought them closer and closer to the outside. So what happened was they ran off the side of the pavement, off the side of the on-ramp, into the grass. Once they got in the grass, things got squirrely quick. They started to head back towards the pavement, but at this point, they were focused on trying to get this thing stopped, and so they locked up the front brake and more or less high-sided into traffic. Now, I noticed by the skid marks. And why do I recognize those skid marks? Because I did exactly the same thing. I high-sided once on a Ninja, and the skid marks were exactly the same way. I was trying to avoid an obstacle. I focused on the obstacle, got too much front brake, locked up the front brake, and the next thing you know, you're up and over. Well, this up and over put them directly into the path of a minivan that was traveling at road speed, which on that stretch of road is about 75 miles an hour, and it was a completely unavoidable impact. So, this is something you always need to be aware of when you're riding a motorcycle. You're always scanning the landscape for obstacles. Let's say a car that's going to pull out in front of you, or an animal that's about to run across your path, or a turn, let's just say, that you've come into a little bit hot. You're always scanning that landscape. But once you've recognized the problem, once you've recognized the obstacle, you have to immediately look for the out. You have to turn your gaze towards where you want to be. If you keep looking at where you don't want to be, your body's automatically, those little micro muscle movements that steer the bike, is automatically, like a magnet, it's going to draw the motorcycle to the problem. So as soon as you recognize the turn that you've come into too fast, or the car that's about to pull out in front of you, or anything like that, as soon as you identify the problem, immediately look for the out. There's always an out. It's something you have to train your mind to do, and a lot of times you don't start training your mind to do it until after you've already had an accident, and you say, oh geez, I target fixated on this thing, and the next thing you know, I'm wrapped around it. Been there, done it, got the t-shirt. So they teach you about this in motorcycle safety courses and stuff like that, but at least half the riders just learn to ride on their own, and they go by instincts and stuff like that. So that's why I think this is a very important topic. It's something that if you ride, or you know somebody who rides, this is super important information. What you see can actually kill you. So identify, I'm going to keep repeating this, okay? Identify the problem. Identify where you don't want to be. And then immediately look for the out and fix your eyes on that out. And then you can almost, if you have any mileage under your belt, even if it's just a few thousand miles, your body has already trained itself to lean a certain way, pull a certain way. Trust your muscle memory. Trust your instincts. By directing your view at your escape point and then letting the body do the rest. You know, in this case, I'm sure the rider, if they had looked for the exit or looked for the escape, they were on an exit, if they had looked for the escape, the way out of that, it probably would have taken a very aggressive lean to make that turn. But if they had been looking where they want to be, their body would have made that move automatically. Especially this was a sport bike. Clear day, good pavement. Even if the thing had marginal tires, it still would have leaned that far, and it would have brought the rider to the inside of that lane, and they would have been able to make the merge. Even if they had gone so far as to low side it, they still would have just slid in a pretty much straight trajectory and stayed in that on-ramp. Instead, well, boom, into traffic. So something to keep in mind, guys. Target fixation. Learn about it. Don't just watch this video, watch other videos about it. And there's a lot of information, and it's something that you really need to be aware of if you're going to go out there on a ride. All right, I hope you got something out of that. I'll see you tomorrow.